Well, hello, good morning, and thank you for joining us for the CBI's Conference on International Trade, which we're broadcasting from ITN's fantastic headquarters here in central London. Now, my name is Daisy McAndrew. I'm delighted to be your host for the next couple of days, during which time we're going to be exploring the importance of understanding the UK's trading role in the global economy. We'll be looking at the role of trade as a vital part of the economic recovery and the importance of international cooperation in driving global trade. I can tell you we have got a fantastic lineup of political speakers. Antonia Romeo, who's joining me now. We've got Liz Truss later on, Ambassador Eleni Kounalakis and Emily Thornberry, to name a few. We've also got a host of senior industry leaders from a range of different companies and sectors, which include Rolls-Royce, Airbus, Diageo, Princess Yachts, Finastra, Darktrace, and of course Visa, who are our main conference sponsors, and we're very grateful to Visa for their support. Now, we'll be covering the topics that really matter most. And I really hope we'll be giving you plenty of practical advice and guidance over the next 2 days. Well, to open up the conference, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage the President of the CBI, Lord Karan Bilimoria. Karan.
Thank you, Daisy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the CBI's first ever International Trade Conference. The UK has always historically been a great trading nation. To this day, it is one of the leading trading nations in the world. Trade in goods and services is equivalent to more than 60% of our GDP, and we're one of the most open economies in the world, and one of the top 3 recipients of inward investment in the world. Along with the United States of America, we are the biggest services exporters in the world. I'd like to begin by thanking our partner Visa for their support. Built through innovation, Visa has helped generations of businesses and consumers all over the world connect and trade with each other. Their tech enabling even the smallest of startups to go global from day one. It's this scale of opportunity that international trade and investment offers to enable more UK firms of all sizes and sectors to benefit. And that is the focus of this conference. And we will be covering not only what opportunities there are, but also how the UK can seize these opportunities. Over the next 2 days, we'll bring you an exciting virtual program featuring senior leaders from global businesses and regional business organizations, as well as top trade representatives from across the world, across seasoned trade policy experts to discuss some of the big issues shaping global trade and investment now and in the future. This includes the shadow of disruption caused by the pandemic across global demand and supply chains. The figures are scary of the drop in trade. The latest updates on the UK's trade deal negotiations, and the power of business and government working together to create prosperity for all in a collaborative manner through trade and investment. Across the programme, we've worked incredibly hard to secure as diverse a range of voices for you to hear from as possible. As many of you probably know, I've been working with my CBI colleagues and senior business leaders on a campaign to increase racial and ethnic participation across business. Our focus is to change the race ratio. We've started by getting as many FTSE 100 and FTSE 250 businesses as possible to commit to appointing at least one racially or ethnically diverse board member in line with the recommendations of the Parker Review on Ethnic Diversity. And that commitment to inclusivity is something that we need to see replicated across organizations and society, including in trade, where we know how important diverse representation across gender, race, age, social background, physical and mental ability is to creating the best possible policy and outcomes for all. In addition to our expert panels, we're also incredibly pleased to welcome the Right Honourable Emily Thornberry, Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. The Right Honourable Liz Truss, Secretary of State for International Trade, for in-depth discussions and sessions, starting with today's opening session, where I'm delighted to be joined by both the CBI Director General, Dame Carolyn Fairbairn, and Antonia Romeo, Permanent Secretary of the Department for International Trade. Welcome, Antonia. I remember so clearly 5 years ago visiting the Milan Expo and going to the UK stand, and it was a giant metal beehive in a garden. You know, the American stand was the biggest by far, but ours was the most creative and innovative by far. This beehive linked to a real beehive in the Midlands in the UK. And when last year on Remembrance Sunday, I was actually standing on the balcony of Antonia's office watching the ceremony, and in her office I saw a model of the Dubai Expo model for the UK stand. Wow, it's super innovative. And it's going to be the most innovative and creative by far, once again, next year, the Dubai Expo in October, November 2021. So it's going to be an invaluable discussion. And ahead of our question and answer, both Karan and Antonia are going to say a few words. So without further ado, Carolyn, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Karan, for getting us off to such a high-energy start. And I'm really pleased to be with you here today to open up our conference, and a particular pleasure to be right here in person. So we are going to spend the next couple of days talking about trade, and for some, it may seem a side issue compared with COVID and the vivid and daily challenges we're facing, but in reality, it is anything but. It is absolutely central because now, more than ever even, thriving, open, global trade is fundamental, not only to the global economy's recovery from this pandemic, but also to our identity, this country's identity as an outward-looking world leader. What we know is that trade is one of the most powerful economic tools the UK has to attract investment and create jobs as we rebuild from this incredibly serious crisis. And the great thing is you can see this in spades right now in our economy today. So as we speak, we have pioneering clusters of firms across the UK taking advantage of being global. So take Belfast, a world force in cybersecurity and emerging tech. Look at Swansea, where firms are drawing on years of industrial experience to lead in the global transition to net zero. Or just look at Glasgow with its cutting-edge biocorridor, pioneering advances in next-generation healthcare, and increasingly famous around the world. Now, these hubs of global expertise are created not by accident, but by design, with industry, academia, and government working hand in glove together, regionally and nationally, to build the most competitive business environment, and then to use it to attract investment, scale up exports, and create new jobs. A great alchemy. And I know that Antonia and her team at the DIT, under the leadership of Secretary of State Liz Truss, are absolutely committed to striking deals that will help many more communities thrive. And it's wonderful to have Antonia with us today. So the numbers are really impressive. So far, the UK has rolled over 20 of the EU's trade deals with countries from South Korea to Switzerland. Now, these are huge achievements, and they can hopefully be replicated with Canada and with Turkey by the end of the year. And the UK's nearly complete. The ink is drying. Free trade agreement with Japan is worth over £15 billion to our economies, with valuable wins for digital trade, financial services, creative industries, manufacturers, food and drink, and more. And firms are now already looking ahead to the opportunities that can come from deals with the US, Australia, and New Zealand. And as you can perhaps tell by now, we at the CBI believe strongly and passionately in trade as a great force for good. But, and there is a but, it is also true that its benefits haven't always been felt by all. Public trust in trade has taken a big hit, and there are people who question whether it delivers the good jobs, keen prices, and better lives promised. And I'm afraid we have seen that uncertainty intensifying in the past months, with the pandemic striking at the heart of our national economy as well as our national health. And we've seen a fortification, a growth in that creeping protectionism of recent years, all at a time when we need that least, and when we need to work together more closely than ever on issues from vaccine development to urgent climate action. So these are tough times indeed. But in this turbulence, there is also opportunity. And I would argue that the overwhelming need for the UK to reaffirm its status as a global leader has never been stronger, and there's never been greater opportunity. It's an amazing thing. In 2021, the UK is not only hosting COP26, but we are also taking up presidency of the G7, and that creates an unprecedented opportunity for leadership. We'll also be assuming our place at the top table of the World Trade Organization for the first time in 40 years. Together, these roles put the UK in an extraordinary position to shape the world's post-pandemic recovery and use it to achieve some of the most important goals of our time. We know what they are: more inclusive global growth, a net zero carbon future, renewed commitment to barrier-free trade that has been proven to raise living standards so powerfully over decades. So today, I'm proud to say that the CBI is launching its own report, Partnership for Prosperity, setting out our plans for how UK government and business can work together to achieve this vision. And we have 4 main recommendations that I'll quickly run through. First, we want a major step change in the collaboration between business and government. The past few months have shown just how much business and government can achieve together, whether it's making ventilators to save lives, rising to the PPE challenge, partnering on rescue packages to save millions of jobs. And now we do want to see that same energy brought into the world of international trade. The architecture set up to inform the UK's trade negotiations by Liz, Antonia and the DI team has been a great first step, but we need to do much more. Many of the UK's allies, US, Canada, Australia, some of the best trading nations, they go much further than consulting with business. They partner with business in real time, including on the toughest of trade-offs. And it is through regular and structured engagement that business can give UK negotiators the edge they need to get the best deal. And when the ink is dry, business can then help promote opportunities to firms of all sizes all across the country. And so I look forward to discussing this opportunity with Antonia shortly and with the Secretary of State this afternoon. So our second thought is that levelling up needs to become absolutely central to our trade and investment ambitions and vice versa. So the CBI, we fully back the government's ambition to tackle regional inequality and to level up. And we believe that unlocking investment is key. Right now, the UK is Europe's top location for inward investment and the second highest in the world, only second to the US. But in 2019, over half of these FDI projects landed in London. The UK's investment calling card needs to stretch much more widely across the UK, and this means reaffirming London. London really matters as a global investment hub, but at the same time extend the reach of inward investment as well as the growth secured through exporting to all UK regions and nations. So today, the CBI is calling for a new Office of Trade Impact. It might be called OFTI, along the lines of the Australian Productivity Commission to analyse UK trade policy success across regions and nations. And we would like to see the devolved administrations and the metro mayors at the heart of trade policy as well, to harness local pride and the jobs and investment that successful exporting can bring to a region. And our third recommendation is that the UK should be the world's champion for trade in services and innovation. These are 2 global growth areas where British companies are undisputed world leaders. And in 2019, the UK's global services exports hit £328 billion, second only again to the US. And yet, while the opportunities here are great, so too are the regulatory barriers, with services share of global trade set to increase by 50% in coming decades. The UK now has an opportunity to focus far more and push far harder for trade liberalisation in services, from finance and legal to creative and design. And by the way, mobility of people must also be a big part of this. Success in services depend on getting the right people to the right place fast and easily, and yes, even in a world of Zoom. And finally, as I've already touched on, the UK has an unprecedented opportunity to lead from the front at the highest of global tables. As host of COP26, G7 president, the UK will have the world's attention, and we should use it to challenge protectionist forces, to build a consensus among like-minded nations, to rebuild public trust in free trade, and to reinforce that global rules-based trade, that system, can be modernized for the new age. And as the CBI takes on the leadership of the B7 next year, which is the grouping of business organizations that supports the G7, we will ensure that business plays its full part alongside the G7 and makes the most of this chance to showcase the very best of UK innovation, beehives and all, on the world stage. The world will be watching, and we will not disappoint them. Now, let me finish with a challenge close to home and right in front of us. With so many UK free trade agreement talks already underway, it's a vital time for the UK to demonstrate its commitment to rule-based, free and fair trade, consistent and without faltering. And at the CBI, we believe securing an agreement between the EU and the UK is central to these efforts. Compromise and common sense, matched by political will, must guide both sides towards an agreement, and it needs to be fast. It needs to be within weeks. There are too many firms, I speak to them all the time, in the UK and the EU27, who are unable to prepare for the end of transition because they don't know what to prepare for. Get a deal, and firms will do all they can to prepare. Get it soon, and they will have more time. Jobs will be saved, and economic hardship minimised at a time when mass unemployment is knocking on our door and every single job counts. So the message from business is clear. The time for a new EU-UK deal is now. And then both sides can draw a line and look beyond it. And for the UK, it will enable firms to look forward to the global opportunities, and it will enable them to do so with the UK's brand as a free trading nation rooted in strong values, reaffirmed beyond question. So to conclude, before we get into discussion, as we emerge from this crisis, trade offers one of the most powerful routes to post-pandemic recovery. And I do believe this is a golden moment for the UK to champion free, fair and open trade, particularly in those industries of the future, from services and low carbon to tech and life sciences. Government and business working in partnership, delivering a long-term vision for UK trade and investment that enables every UK region to prosper, and at the same time stepping up globally to tackle the defining challenges of our age. Now, these may be challenging and tough days, but by working together, we have a historic chance to shape a better future. Thank you very much. And Daisy, back to you.
Carolyn, thank you very much. And of course, Karan, before Carolyn, lots and lots of talking points, I think, for us to get into over the next couple of days, really putting trade at the centre of the in-tray, if you like. We're going to be hearing from Antonia Romeo, Permanent Secretary to the Department of International Trade, in just a moment. And we're delighted, Antonia, to have you with us today. You will obviously have noticed that we are doing things differently today. We don't have our usual audience. We can't see you in person, but we do want you to take part in this discussion nonetheless. So please do send me any questions you have that you would like me to put to the panel or put to our speakers. You can use the question function on the platform that you're watching us on, and I will make sure to put your questions to our guests, because we really do want this to be a two-way conversation, not a one-way conversation. So do get your questions to us when you can. Antonia, you've heard from Karan, you've heard from Carolyn. I can understand that your in-tray is absolutely huge at the moment. There's an awful lot going on, but perhaps you could bring us up to date on what your in-tray looks like, how things are from the DTI's point of view.
Great. Well, thank you, Daisy, and thanks to Karen and Carolyn for inviting me today. Great to be on this panel. I thought I would pick up on a few of the themes of Carolyn's speech and then say a little about what DIT is doing in those areas. The starting point, of course, is that open free trade is absolutely fundamental to UK's prosperity and to our position on the global stage. Completely agree. with that. And of course, COVID has, there is no doubt, made the global trading environment much more challenging. And we have seen already in Q2 of this year the sharpest ever decline on record in global merchandise trade, for example. And this came on top of an already challenging context for global trade, with what we've seen trade tensions in recent years across the world. We've had a shift in some areas towards protectionism and away from globalization. And the pandemic has accelerated a lot of the long-term trends, which has meant that many additional restrictive measures have been put in place. And while some of those measures have now been unwound, that has not happened universally. So at DIT, we've been working at government-to-government level bilaterally and also via multilateral fora to encourage open trade and to support unwinding of those restrictive trade measures. We've also been developing specific sector bounce-back plans in partnership with other departments in Whitehall to look at particular trade measures to put in place to support trading businesses who have been impacted by COVID. So far, we've launched in a number of sectors, including agriculture, technology, and food and drink, with more to come in coming months. We've obviously been working on our bilateral and plurilateral trade deals, negotiating those. Carolyn mentioned Japan. These are aimed at unlocking opportunities for UK companies. The Japan trade deal will provide tariff-free trade in the long term on 99% of UK exports to Japan, and it goes further than the equivalent EU-Japan deal, which was the starting point. And we're making good progress on a number of other FTAs, US, Australia, New Zealand, potential future accession to CPTPP to unlock further opportunities for British companies. The second point is, Carolyn referred to supply chains. And of course, the crisis has reminded us of the importance of supply chain resilience. And in particular, the past year has shown our dependence on these global value supply chains across the world and potential vulnerability to external shocks in those supply chains. So through a new cross-government project called Project Defend, we've been working to strengthen UK supply chain resilience, both looking at diversification to keep trade flowing, at international collaboration, including through the G7 and other fora, to reduce the incentive for new trade restrictions, but also, of course, through looking at domestic supply. And thirdly, more important than ever, I completely agree that the UK champions free trade, open-based trade, and the rules-based trading system and our values on the global stage. So our focus at the WTO, exactly on the themes that Carolyn mentioned in her speech, services trade, technology, the environment, our upcoming presidency of the G7, COP26, indeed the Dubai Expo. These are influential platforms for us to support that agenda and to achieve change. And finally, I just really endorse what you say, Carolyn and Karan, about the partnership between business and government. As you know, we work very closely together, DIT with the CBI, with business. DIT is a business-facing department. We've got 4,500 people, including many across the world. Across the UK, we're talking to tens of thousands of businesses every month. We've set up the new trade advisory groups, which aims to allow business to have a voice, to have influence over these trade deals, and essentially for us to work together as we do embark on, as we move out of the transition period, as we embark on our new whole trade agenda, including through these new FTAs. And we want to continue to work in very close partnership with business. So looking forward to a good discussion. Thank you.
Antonia, thank you so much. Karan, I'm going to come straight to you just for a quick response to what Antonia has laid out there. And from your perspective, from business perspective, what's your number one, the most urgent thing you need Antonia's department to be doing?
We really appreciate, Antonia, whatever you and the DIT do for business. And of course, you're doing this globally. I think our members, many of them work with the embassies and high commissions around the world. And people don't realize we have one of the two biggest diplomatic services in the world in terms of reach and presence around countries. In countries like India, it's, I think, the biggest or second biggest presence we have in the world. And a huge part of that is the trade support that any business in the UK has access to. I've used it for my own business. It's fantastic. They will give you the residence to use for product launches. They'll do market research for you. It's great that it's out there to help business. I think we need to promote that much more. But of course, we do want, and we've done surveys with our members, 77% of our members want a Brexit deal done. And it's really crucial we get that deal done. And it's very reassuring to hear the support that you're providing during this pandemic and this crisis. We need that support because it is more difficult with supply chains. And this is the thing about the coronavirus crisis. It's a demand shock. In my case, wearing my Cobra Beer hat for 3.5 months, no sales in our restaurant, 7,000 shut. Then you have a supply shock because it reverberates with supply chains. And then you have the demand and supply shock reverberating around the world. So it affects you globally. And our exports really suffered badly during this as well. So there's no question about it. It's a hugely challenging environment, and we need to work closely and collaboratively together.
Antonia.
Yeah, great. I mean, I completely agree with that. I think the key thing is, for a number of these things, a trade deal on its own doesn't mean anything unless there is a business that is prepared to do trade through that trade deal. So it's very important that those people negotiating the trade deals are doing so with a complete understanding of how British business, and businesses right across the UK will benefit from these deals. So that partnership is absolutely essential. And then I also completely agree. It's the same thing. And as Karen and Carolyn know, we've been doing a lot of work together on supply chains because, of course, when you're looking at supply chain resilience, often it's about the resilience of the business's supply chain as much as it is about what the government's doing. So government has a role to play, including in this government-to-government negotiation I talked about unwinding these trade restrictions where they do exist. But actually, a lot of it is about ensuring that businesses have more resilient supply chains, including through diversification. So joining up on that, it has been essential in all the work we've been doing and will continue to be so.
Carolyn, in your opening remarks, you made an impassioned plea on behalf of businesses to get the Brexit deal, to get the EU deal done because of the practicalities, not the politics of businesses not being able to plan. Has what Antonia's told you reassured you, or are you as concerned?
Well, Antonia's department deals mostly on the international, the non-EU trade deals, and I have to say we hugely value our working relationship with DIT. I think that the point that we've been trying to emphasise around the fierce urgency of now is that firms, 40% of firms believe that there's going to be an extension to transition. They are so focused on COVID that they have not had the chance to really think about their borders, the paperwork that they're going to need, how their tariff regime may change. The single biggest thing that will make them encourage them to prepare is a deal. And so the point that we've been making to government is we've got an opportunity next week with the sizably important EU Council. Use that to flesh out a deal, and it will protect jobs on both sides. So, strong message, still not unchanged for a while, but now it's very urgent.
Do you get? You talked about partnerships, and Carolyn, in her opening remarks, was urging more partnerships, less advisory relationships. Really getting business into the heart of government thinking, with business and government doing really solid partnerships. And I know, and you mentioned you've announced these new collaborations in August with 11 different industry areas, but the government has. But is there scope for what Carolyn was talking about, deeper partnerships, stronger partnerships with business?
So I think in partnership, it always comes down to two things. There's the structures you can put in place, and there's the actual practical difference it makes on the ground. So is the listening to business, does it turn into something that is that changes something? And I think in a way that's going to be the proof of the process we've put in place. So as you mentioned, we've launched the trade advisory groups. They're going to meet sort of formally, they'll meet 3 times a year, but we're going to have a number of ad hoc group, bringing together of those groups in order to have that input into the trade negotiations. So we have already been bringing together different trade advisory groups, for example, on the latest round for the US. We brought together all the groups in September as we were approaching agreement in principle with the Japan deal. So I think the key thing is through those groups, making sure that business really has an opportunity to understand the areas that we're talking about. And of course, don't forget, we're at the outset of this in many ways. I mean, it's been for those of us in the department, it's been a 4-year journey to get to this point, building the capability to be able to negotiate these deals and do something completely new for the UK. But nonetheless, we're still, what we're doing, for example, with Japan will become the template, we'll grow on it, we'll be doing it with the other deals as we go forward. So I think there's always an opportunity for business to play a huge role. I mean, they have to play a huge role, there's no doubt about that. The question is, how can we continue to deepen that interaction and ensure that what we're delivering is going to make a difference to British business across the UK?
Karan, Carolyn and I, a couple of days ago, and this is a bit of a spoiler alert, we pre-recorded a panel discussion that will be going out later today, I think, with Lord Peter Mandelson, amongst others. And he was talking about, with his experience of business and government, talking about how businesses very often come to government with a complaint or a moan about what government is or isn't doing for them. But what he was urging people watching to do is to, when you come with a complaint about what government's doing, try to come with a solution as well to offer people like Antonia or ministers. And I wonder, from your business point of view, whether that resonates with you when we're talking about these issues and how relationships with people like Antonia work best.
Well, the whole concept of entrepreneurship is spotting opportunities, and invariably those opportunities are a problem or a product or a service that you're dissatisfied with, and then you think you can do it differently or better and change the marketplace. So it's all about spotting problems. No point complaining. What's the solution? That's got to be the mindset. And if you can come to government saying, this is the problem, this is what we think we should do. For example, I mean, just today, I was on television this morning talking about being questioned about the lockdowns. And there were people saying, well, should pubs be closed at 10 o'clock and the tiered system of lockdowns, which we've been calling out for some time. But I said, there is a problem, and that's testing. And we need mass testing. And here's the solution to mass testing. And this is what we should do. So it's very specific about the solution. And I think that's the way in the CBI, we can work so much with government because we represent 1/3 of the private sector workforce and 190,000 companies and 7 million employees all around the regions and the nations. So if we work collaboratively, there's a lot that we can do together. But can I ask you one question? This is when I founded the UK-India Business Council, going back to the 2003, 2006, 2007, around that period, there was something called Trade Partners UK. Then it became UK Trade and Investment. But it was always an organization that reported to both the Foreign Office and to the Department of Business. So there was very clearly working with both departments. Does that mindset and structure still exist with what is today the DIT? Is there any way one could improve that or business could work to help that?
So look, I mean, great question, because of course DIT, as you know, was created partly out of UKTI, which is the agency that you're describing, and then other parts across government, including a small team that was 45 people, now almost 700 people, to do trade deals and negotiation. And building that capability, that world-class capability, has been a big part of the role over the last 4 years. Of course, UKTI, because it was an agency, it's worked for 2 departments. I very much see DIT as being a department that lives or dies by collaboration, essentially. And if you think about it, many government departments are essentially sectoral departments. They're responsible for certain sectors. And we're essentially a horizontal department. We do all exports, all investment, trade negotiations across all sectors. So we work incredibly closely with all government departments. And that's from when we're doing trade deals, having the departments with the expertise involved in the negotiations is absolutely essential. That could be DEFRA on agriculture, it could be DCMS on digital, but that's obviously a crucial part of it. And then, we definitely work incredibly closely. Obviously, overseas, you mentioned the diplomatic network, the DIT overseas network and the diplomatic network, are totally co-located. They completely work together. They're essentially part of the same overseas network to deliver what we call one HMG, one government overseas. And of course, with the business department, we work incredibly closely all the time. These are sort of daily interactions. So I would say now, DIT, which was created because the government was now going to be doing, the country was going to be doing for the first time these new global trade deals and indeed some of the continuity agreements and so on. All of that has we've been baked in to the Whitehall system now, but we work incredibly closely with all departments, not only those two, I would say.
You.
Carolyn.
Can I follow up on that, Antonia? Because I think that is great. And because one of the risks you have is that trade happens over here and the rest of government happens over here. And there's one aspect that I'm particularly interested in joining up on, and that's kind of the future industrial strategy of the UK post-COVID and making sure that is really linked with our trade agenda. If I give a concrete example, our e-commerce has just exploded in the last 6 months. We were already a strong e-commerce nation, but so many businesses have gone online and doing it very successfully. And therefore, trade deals, having an e-commerce chapter to them has become far more important as part of our kind of future economic plan. Are we sufficiently joined up between our industrial strategy and our international strategy? Because they need to be two sides of the same coin.
So I completely agree. They've got to be two sides of the same coin. In fact, in a way, you can't have an industrial strategy or whatever one chooses to call it, a strategy for the domestic business world without actually thinking about what's happening globally. Almost nothing, business is global now. There's almost nothing that any one business does that isn't impacted by what is happening out in the global system. So as a result, it's not about so much internationalizing the industrial strategy as it's about iterating constantly to ensure that that strategy is something that can be, that works in the global context.
Exactly.
I think there's two important sort of strategies or reviews that we think about all the time and that drive essentially the overall direction of what we do. One is the sort of the industrial strategy, the refreshed post-COVID, what we're doing about economic recovery. And the other, of course, will be what comes out of the integrated review, which will also be looking at, the importance of which global markets and set some of those direction. And the key thing is that we are totally aligned with that. So we're not going off, as you say, on our in a different space. We've got to be, the government's got to be joined up, and we've all got to be pulling in the same direction. So we should be leaning in on trade deals with those areas where we think there is most benefit for business in those areas. So, the green economy is a great example. Low carbon. What is it that we can do through trade to do that? And of course, it's not just the new trade deals being negotiated. It's also all the market access work we do every day across the world to just open up markets. Doesn't have to be through a all singing, all dancing trade deal, can just be the relentless work of removing tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers through that work, and indeed through our work at the WTO as well. So I agree.
I've been having a look at some questions that have been coming in, and some of them I think are really, really good. So thank you for sending your questions in. Do continue to send more questions in. If you see me looking at this iPad, that's what I'm checking to see what you think about our discussion and what questions you've got. And there's a question which I think really resonates with Carolyn, with your opening remarks, which I was also very struck by. This is a question for Antonia, but it says, Carolyn mentioned that public trust in trade has been hit. Which was a bit of your speech that I was very struck by as well. And the question is, what can DIT do to address that trust issue?
Well, look, obviously it's an important question. I think a lot of this will come down to scrutiny. It's going to come down to transparency of what we're doing, and we aim to be obviously as transparent as possible. It's about ensuring that what we're doing on trade essentially is good for people in the UK and crucially across the whole of the UK. And that's about being good for consumers and, lower prices, all the things that those of us, economists talk about all the time, the benefits that Ricardo set out of trade is a good thing for consumers, as well as ensuring that we are doing the right deals for our producers. And the government's been really clear on this, which is that we've got to, the government will only sign a deal when it is the right deal for producers and consumers in the UK. So I think that on the trust issue, part of it is going to be about proving, as we go through these deals, that they have been beneficial, because, of course, we can set out at this point, this is our intention. The key thing is going to be, as we get those deals, as we have delivered, as Carolyn said, we've signed 20 of the continuity agreements. These things being delivered. And I think the key measure for DIT's success is going to be delivery, getting on and doing what we were tasked to do, which is essentially supporting British business through trade, through investment, through opening up markets around the world and championing free trade. The other thing to say is this is obviously a global issue, and we've got to work through these multilateral fora. So the work we'll be doing at the WTO, a very important part of this. How can like-minded countries work together to build up trust in trade, to show, the idea that trade is not seen as something, open and free trade is not seen as something that is beneficial for global prosperity, UK prosperity, but also global prosperity, is something that probably 5 years ago we would not have thought we were having that conversation. So I think the work we're doing in the WTO and, final point, our leadership, our presidency of the G7, our work at COP26 and so on, are other great platforms that will be able to support that work.
Karan.
No, I just wanted to, what you've just said is so important in that for people to understand, and that is business and consumers, that we talk about promoting exports. And of course we want to export more. And every business, and you said business, every business should think global from day one. From the day they start with the technology that exists, you can think globally, you can operate globally from day one. So exports is really key. But as a country, we're a net importer. So we've also got to make sure that we're really competitive in terms of what we import into our country, which is to the benefit of our consumers who get lower prices. And this is very important from the EU's point of view. That's almost 50% of our trade. We've got to make sure we get a free trade deal with the EU with no tariffs and no duties. And so the consumers benefit from that as well. But linked to that, and people often ignore this, is not just exports and imports, and not just goods, but also services, which we're so strong in, but also inward investment. And it's that inward investment that we're so good at, number 2 or 3 in the world every year, which brings in that investment from all around the world that powers our economy ahead, that makes us more competitive in every way, including exports and imports.
Yeah. Just to say quickly on investment, totally agree with that. And obviously we've got there's a huge drive, across the world now to do something about FDI globally has been falling, but actually the UK is in a fantastic position. And all the reasons we know that global companies want to invest in the UK, it's obviously things like our rule of law, but our time zone, it's also our sort of world-beating transport, comms, infrastructure, it's our very favourable tax and labour market conditions. All of these things, we have to ensure that we're boosting those and continue to do even more to make sure that the UK maintains its, premier position in Europe as a recipient of FDI, and keep doing so.
And Carolyn, I definitely want your reaction, but also just to bring you back to that point you were making about regional inequality and the trust issue that brings with it, and some people feeling much more benefit than others from any investment.
Well, I'd really like to link those thoughts, actually, because I think winning public trust in trade is really about action, and it's about action that brings people with you. So I think that how we have a model of trade that is collaborative among unions, among business, academia, and government and consumer groups. We haven't quite got there, but we're on the road. But I think how we use trade to bring investment into parts of our country that need that is just fundamental. And I've been very struck by how concentrated foreign investment has been in the South. incredibly concentrated. And yet it doesn't have to be that way. I was on a trade mission to China a few years ago, and Chinese businesses kept asking me about the Northern Powerhouse. They knew it, they'd heard of it, they understood it, and actually we have seen investment going into the Greater Manchester area and parts of the Northern Powerhouse as a result. We can do more, and I think if we do harness local pride, our metro mayors I mentioned in my comments earlier, I think we have the opportunity to start, I think, selling the best of our regions, because they all have, I think, distinctive strengths, and particularly attached to low carbon. We know that, for example, in the Midlands, we want to build a gigafactory to build batteries. In the northeast, hydrogen and carbon capture, sustainable energy. So this is, I agree with Karan, about investment. It's about collaboration, and it's about a rebalancing of investment into other parts of the country.
Another question for Antonia that's come from Jacqueline Balian. I hope I've pronounced that right. How will DIT continue to support SME exporters at this critical time?
So, I mean, I think there's two things, as may have already been referred to. I know we talked about the e-commerce chapter, but obviously we have an SMEs chapter in our trade, as we're doing these trade negotiations. That's absolutely essential, because an SMEs chapter can really help you ensure that you're putting right at the heart of your trade policy what it is that SMEs need. And often that's about transparency, often it's about removal of red tape. We also do a lot of practical work on the ground. So in DIT, because we're responsible for supporting British exporters, we've got hundreds of people across the UK who are working with British businesses. Many of these will be small companies, but we also are developing what we currently have, which is our offer, our digital offer, to support for a lot of companies, just starting with exporters. What they need is they like to know about peer-to-peer support. They like to know that someone else has done it. They want to know what they did, someone like them, what it took for them to export. And then also a lot of these questions are fairly, common to the particular SME. So you can actually provide quite a lot of information if you can get your digital offer right. So we're doing a lot of work on ensuring we've got the right digital offer in place for SMEs. But as I say, we've got a lot of interaction, face-to-face interaction as well that happens, because sometimes that's what's needed. And then perhaps a final point, referring back to something that you said earlier, Daisy, about for business talking to government. So I've recruited into DIT a number of people who are actually from business. That's really important, is that you recruit the sort of people to talk to business who actually deeply understand business. And so this, I think, helps to make that, it doesn't have to be a choice between, as it were, complaining or providing a solution. It's working together on what it is that's going to help drive UK prosperity. And we're very aware that what's going to make a big difference is individual companies choosing to export, or individual companies who are exporting choosing to export more. And we want to work with those companies to support that process with the CBI and other BROs.
Karan, from your point of view, I completely take Antonia's point about getting business people, who speak the language, who have it in their DNA within government. But as far as partnerships between government and business, is there more that could be done, do you think? Or is it more of an optical thing rather than not having the expertise right at the centre? I
agree completely with what Antonia said, that you've got to have these role models, that businesses that have done it. And it's worked with me over the years as I built my business from scratch. And we now export to 40 countries around the world. And it's an integral part of our business. It's the way we think. We have to increase our exports. We want our presence in all these countries. We want to keep growing our exports. And the more you can share those examples and reach out, and a lot of it is a lack of awareness. And many of our companies don't export at all. They don't even think about it. Yeah. So we've got a great job to do working in partnership with the DIT. That's where we can reach out to. We've got our members to reach out to. With your help, we can do it together. And there's a huge opportunity out there. In fact, one of the questions is similar to that, asking you, you mentioned there the 40 countries that you export to, and our questioner is asking you, which other countries do you think do it better or best as far as the partnership and the help for business? We do it pretty well. It's just that I think there's a lack of awareness amongst our business community, particularly the SMEs, about the access that exists. And the companies that do take advantage, for example, of all the facilities around the world through our missions, our embassies and high commissions, if only people knew you could use them, and it's there for the taking, and the people don't know about it. Of course, the Americans do it very well, and they are hugely proactive on it. The Germans do it fantastically well, but they're an exporting powerhouse. It's a huge part of their economy. Again, sectors. We ignore our manufacturing sector. Our manufacturing sector in this country is 10% of our GDP. It's one of the biggest manufacturing industries in the world, and it's world class, and it's huge when it comes to exports as well. So we shouldn't neglect our manufacturing, although services make up 80% of our GDP.
Question for Carolyn from Andy. Antonia talked about building consensus through multilateral fora to address trust in trade and global issues. How can business support that consensus? So I'm putting it back into your lap and saying, what more can business do?
Yeah.
And Andy also adds, particularly when it comes to climate change, net zero challenge.
Well, I think the first thing to say is that businesses are completely unanimous that they support the rules-based multilateral way of running trade. The alternative is Wild West. The idea of having standards and rules. And so we have been supporting the WTO now for a couple of years. It's very interesting. I think the WTO was not a household name in the UK. It became much more one through the Brexit negotiations. But the fact is, it's a really important organisation that is in some trouble. There is some real challenges and calls for reform, which are justified. I mean, I think that there are areas where the WTO can reform, but it stands for something really powerful around the use of trade on a multilateral basis to do good. And the particular areas where I think business can support will be to help define standards around climate change and a green recovery. And when we get our seat at that table, I think we will use it very strongly there. Around inclusive growth, again, can be a target for trade discussions. And I think fundamentally this point about the UK and business, and we will do this, championing manufacturing, absolutely, championing e-commerce, but also championing services. It has not been a very commonly seen feature of trade deals. We can help make it a commonly seen feature of trade deals. And I'd link it right back to creating jobs here. 66% of service jobs in the UK are outside London. We can use it to help to level up if we get those multilateral agreements right.
And I wonder how, with the COVID having the impact it's having on working practices and people working from home, and perhaps that will make a difference to the north-south divide or so many jobs being concentrated in London, and what the potential knock-on impact of that might be. I
think it's very interesting, and it does create opportunities for services to be genuinely all over the country. So all the more reason to go for this strongly. But interestingly, the Japan deal has a very strong services chapter. So I think DIT absolutely understand that, and it's how business can help support them to work out exactly what parts of services liberalisation will make the most difference.
We've covered a lot of ground, and thank you for the questions. Karan, I'm going to turn to you for a sort of some final thoughts on this opening discussion that we've had.
Thank you very much, Daisy, and thank you, Carolyn. And Antonia, it's been fantastic to have you here to open the conference. Thank you to all of you for your brilliant questions, and I'm sorry if we haven't been able to answer all of them. And I hope this is a taste of what's to come over the next 2 days in this 1 hour, how much we have covered. How much ground. I mean, Antonia, you started by emphasizing the open and free trade being a priority for our country, and the fact that the pandemic has really been a challenge, and the sectors that have been affected, agriculture, food and drink, and the Japan FTA. I think it's remarkable how you've managed to negotiate this FTA, and you said 99% of tariff-free exports. I mean, that's absolutely brilliant, and even better, one would argue, than the EU-Japan trade and the rolling over and the potential of the US, Australia, New Zealand, etc., the Pacific deal as well. The supply chain resilience that you've spoken about, the Project Defend, and again, talking about championing open free and, as Carolyn said, rules-based, the WTO, how important that is to us. The partnership between government and business, that's a theme that's run through this discussion. You've got 4,500 people in DIT now, and also the access to the high commissions and embassies around the world, the resilience that we've spoken about, the Brexit deal that is really crucial, and the one HMG, joined up government. That message came across pretty strongly. And then the industrial strategy and trade strategy working. And Antonia said, business is global now. And the green economy has come through. Market access we've spoken about. The public trust in trade that's been hit. I think we've had a really good open discussion about that, of how important that is. And of course, the global issues, like-minded countries working together. Regional inequalities we've spoken about, SMEs, the SME chapter that's very important, the digital support, and the importance of the WTO and championing services and levelling up. Wow, what a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Karan, thank you so much. Carolyn, thank you. Of course, you'll both be back as the two-day conference goes ahead. Antonia, again, thank you so much for finding the time in your diary to come and join us today. And of course, thank you for your questions. That concludes this opening session. As Karan said, it was a really great discussion. I'm sure you'll agree. And what a way to kick off our first virtual conference. We're doing things very differently. Again, my thanks to Antonia, to Karan, to Carolyn. Now, next up, we have a pre-recorded discussion on the UK-China relationship and business priorities, a really interesting debate between Sir Sherard Coper-Coles, Chair of China-Britain Business Council, Guy Drury from the CBI, Joe Hawley, Consul General from Shangzhou and South China, and Patrick Horgan from Rolls-Royce. Then at 2 o'clock, we'll have the second of our 3 live discussions of the day, where we're going to be focusing on the economic benefits of trade and the importance of a stable global trading system. I look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye.